This is going to be my final word on Mill, at least for the moment. And it's a crucial point for making the transition from Mill to Kant. We're going to be going backwards in history after this for the next two authors, Kant and Aristotle. And in the case of Mill and Kant, it's because Kant actually is familiar with the more ancient forms of the Epicurean or hedonistic theories about ethics that Mill founds his philosophy on. And Kant's answer to them will apply just as well to Mill as to the earlier thinkers. Okay, before I tell you the solution, let's have a close look at the problem Mill creates. It's in this nice little phrase he adds at the end of the greatest happiness principle to make it complete. Quote, without violating the rights of anyone, end quote. Now, definitely, that's a good phrase to add. It's an effective answer to the standard objection to Bentham. If you're respecting everybody's rights, then you're not authorized by the GHP to purchase the happiness of the majority by sacrificing the happiness or even the existence of minorities. That's not the problem. That's the solution to the problem. That's probably the most important thing Mill could do to salvage the GHP so that it could still be used. At least we have to admit, I think, that someone who lives by the GHP, at least someone who lives by Mill's version of it, is going to turn out to be a very good person. They're going to live a noble life that is very worthy of human dignity, and they're going to help a lot of people. They're not going to be selfish like most of us. They will be virtuous individuals. So if we're looking for a theory of life to live by and to become good people, we could do much worse than choose Mill's GHP as the highest principle of our decisions. The difficulty is a different one. Mill's theory is probably incoherent. It's probably not an example of clear and consistent thinking about ethics. As insightful as it is, there's a big gaping hole in it, and it's around this issue of rights. If we look at what Mill means by a right, close to the middle of chapter 5 on justice and the GHP, here's the passage. To have a right, then, is to have something which society ought to defend me in the possession of. A little abstract, but let's see if we can think of some examples that will help us make sense of it. Actually, one primary example, freedom of speech. In the US and in most democracies, freedom of speech is considered a right. But what does that mean? It means that we're free to express our thoughts, our ideas, opinions, political positions, and so forth. And that's a very important thing for the citizen of a democracy to be able to do. And when does it become important and difficult to preserve someone's rights of free speech? Well, it's when someone says something that's unpopular and even offensive to most people. The right to free speech means that society has made a commitment to defend the person's right to say unpopular and even offensive things. What does it mean to say that they're unpopular or offensive? It means that they cause other people unhappiness. In fact, they usually cause the majority of people unhappiness, or it wouldn't be an issue. So again, let's think this idea all the way through to the end, as logically and coherently as we can. If this is the kind of example Mill is thinking of, we have to notice that Mill means something very interesting and even surprising. To have a right is to have something that society ought to defend me in the possession and exercise of, even if it makes everyone else unhappy. The idea of rights is a limitation on the pleasure principle. And the pleasure principle is not a limitation on rights, because a right is a right regardless of its effect on anyone's happiness. What are the consequences of this line of thinking? First, it suggests that happiness is not the highest ethical principle if rights can essentially override the GHP. If rights are above the GHP, then the GHP can't be the highest ethical principle. That means either that the principle of rights is the highest principle of ethics instead of the GHP, or there is some other principle that both rights and the GHP are derived from. If you can't get rights from the GHP, and you have to add the language of rights to the GHP to make it defensible, then Mill is wrong, or at least radically incomplete. He hasn't gotten all the way up to the highest ethical principle, or all the way down to the ultimate foundation of ethical thinking. As many insights as Mill's book has brought us about ethical life, it looks like we may have to declare his project a failure. The pursuit of pleasure, as important as it is, and as good a life as it might lead to when we pursue it with precision and coherence and nuance, and a commitment to understanding higher pleasures, it's not going to be enough to get us all the way to the goal. We'll have to look beyond Mill to get a complete picture. And that's why we have 3 more books to read.